Jai Hind, welcome to Dev Talks. This is Aadi. China is starting up again. Xi Jinping has sat down in his seat and he's started up with his job of fingering around with India. That's something we can see happening with the Chinese ship which has come into the Indian Ocean. This news has not been talked about so much, but there is a Chinese ship which is in the Indian Ocean which has come way before schedule of what it was supposed to come, and it is there trying to probably spy on some missile tests that India was trying to do. Looks like a certain provocation and looks like an exact repeat of what was happening before. Now, one thing I'd like to tell you is a lot of times when we look at these situations, is we realize that uh, a lot of times we look at it from a one-sided angle, because what our media tells us ki bhai, China is doing this, China is doing that, China is doing this, China is doing that. All we hear is that we really don't see a balance of two things, right? So there is this one provocation. Has India done anything? Something that we have to see. A lot of times we find ourselves to be in a very tame sort of a position, not really wanting to go up to the challenge and do stuff. Maybe, may not be the case. Let's try and see if we can get some information about this today. I have some slides for you, but before I do, please like this video, subscribe, check your bell icons so that you get the notifications. Most importantly, guys, check out the website www.thedevtalks.com. On Tuesday, I will be publishing an article about the US elections. Uh, it's on the 8th, so it's coming out on the same day. I'll share it with all of you guys and it'll be there on the website so you can check it out. If you can, do contribute to the Dev Talks efforts by clicking the join button to become a member, or thanks to send a super sticker or a super chat. And of course, you can directly contribute to me from the UPI mentioned below your screen. So let's just dig into this particular slide and see what's happening. I want us to keep an open mind. I want us to try and see the information that I'm going to give you. These are, of course, not all the information. I can't put that all the information in about half an hour, 45-minute worth of a video, but there is certain amount of information that I'd like us to see so that we understand what's happening around us and we look at things in a little larger perspective. Right, so the first slide comes. Indian Navy is tracking a Chinese surveillance vessel, Wongyang 6. Remember, the previous one that came was Wongyang 5. This thing came towards the, towards Sri Lanka. And this particular ship has entered the Indian Ocean a week ahead of schedule, as I told you. Uh, you know, uh, of a missile test, which was supposed to happen in the Bay of Bengal. We'll talk about what kind of missile tests and this and that. This particular ship, again, is the same series of ship that the Chinese have with regards to surveillance. They do satellite surveillance, they can track missiles, they can track rockets, they can track all these kind of things. They've got a lot of satellite arrays and radars. There are a lot of rumors about what happened with the Wongyang 5 the last time it came to Sri Lanka. Some rumors say that we had our own sort of a counter balance to that already in place and it wasn't able to penetrate that thing. Some rumors talk about we were able to flood that particular system with a lot of blank data and they kind of did not have much to show when they went back home. There was a news about the particular senior officer, the naval officer, being transferred from his post after this visit of the Wongyang 5 happened before. So it's a very, very simple thing. This particular ship is there. It's trying to, spy on a missile test, which is going to happen. This ship has been tracked, and some time ago, sorry about the bad quality of the map, but this is something I picked out from the Marine Traffic website. This is the Wongyong 6 right now crossing Bali. Now, this is, as I said, not a live map. It's about, since the morning, probably. So it's crossed Bali, entered the main Indian Ocean, where I'm sure a lot of, as I said earlier, Indian Navy ships are tracking it, and there's obviously going to be a whole lot of activity, which is I'm not aware of, but I know for the fact that something would be happening. Now, this is what the news is. This area warning alert was issued by India, and launch window was between the 10th and 11th of November. A no-fly zone was issued in a very large area, right? So the defense ministry is not formally commented on the matter, but some people say it's the K4 submarine launched ballistic missile. Testing of such missiles have been happening. Some people say it's the Agni. I'd put my money on the Agni, but let's see how kind of this thing goes forward. So basically, the Chinese ship is entering this entire area. He won't really come close to India and stuff like that. He's got satellite radars, arrays, and stuff like that, which should be able to pick up what's happening. This particular ship would be trying to track the trajectory, the kind of speed that this rocket can achieve, the kind of payload probably it's carrying, and how far does it go. Whole lot of data that probably militarily it's required for it to find out about the missile program of India. Now, some touch points I want to talk about. This is towards China. What China is kind of, I would say, trying to do with India. Certain things that I want to talk about here, and I also have a touch point where what India has been doing with China. So we'll take this both of them, and then at the end of it, let's come and see, and please share your comments so that we realize where we are in terms of a balance between both. Of course, some of us might say China has a larger economy, so the balance would be tilting over there. Well, let's wait and watch. There's a lot which has happened in the past 2 years since the starting of the standoff in Ladakh, and I think India has come a far distance from what we were before. But let's still dig into this. So there's a couple of things I'll be talking about. One is the Twitter deal. It's very critical to keep a track of this. All of us are, on Twitter, and we need to figure out what's happening with this particular site, because a lot of our information, a lot of our discussions happen there. What kind of data mining will be happening for that, we don't know. Something that we will discuss. Chinese ship, as I told you, this is the second time in some time that the Chinese ship has started coming in. There, one professor from one of the defense universities had mentioned that soon enough you will find the Chinese aircraft carrier fleet sailing in the Indian Ocean. Uh, I put this question across to Admiral Anup Singh when I did an interview with him about the Chinese Navy. Check it out. He gives some very clear answers as to what he feels is the capability at the moment, and what he sees as the capability of the Chinese Navy going forward. Our trade deficit, how is it built up to be a weapon against us? Something that we need to understand. This China ka maal sasta hai is really taken us for a ride, and I'll tell you a little bit more about it. The Chinese are talking about, and this is something, this is probably a statement that has come out. I'm not sure how far this will go to, but because if you guys know, India and Bangladesh, the Teesta water issue is still pending. The Chinese have a proposal of about 983 or $1 billion project to kind of do a little development in the Bangladesh side of the Teesta River, so that the flooding could be controlled and this and that. And India and Bangladesh have a lot more to discuss on this particular subject. So I guess China is trying to get inside and get something out of it. China is starting to hyphenate India and the US. That's something that we need to understand and we need to realize. So we find certain rhetoric is common for both India and the United States, and I'll talk about it. And cartographic steps. This is something that the Chinese love doing, making maps. We'll talk about this. But this was, although not there in the list that I showed you, Galwan Zero or Hero. As a matter of fact, this is the Chinese hero. Is supposed to be Colonel Ki Fabao. Okay, so he was one of the chaps who was fighting against our forces in Galwan, and he's been tailed as a big hero. He's been given 2 3 medals and this and that. So there's a tweet that was put out by this particular handle, and I've just put a screenshot. You guys should follow him, and I mean, you get a lot of insight into this. Don't start fighting with them, because then they'll block you and you won't be able to see what they're talking about. It's good that you can just quietly follow them. It's easier that way. A lot of us try and fight a lot of the negative propaganda online. Remember, they just block you and the propaganda still goes on. It'll be better if we can read it and figure out what's happening, what are they talking about, so that we can kind of counter it in the way we like to do it. A lot of us in the WhatsApp group of Dev Talks have been talking about how to counter propaganda. It's not an easy subject. I mean, I'll discuss it with someone who's a little more experienced in this particular field. But anyways, let's get back to this. The territory of the motherland, not an inch of land. That's what he says. Feel the tender feelings of the clanking vows of Kifabao, the hero and uh, the hero head of defending the country. The state-controlled Chinese television has come out with this short series of short videos called the Pilot. 13th October, this thing came out. Some news came in India, but I guess a lot of us have learned how to ignore all this, Chinese saman and that they keep pushing out in terms of videos. Ki Fabao has been termed as China's Galwan hero. They also want to create a certain rhetoric like the entire celebration of the sacrifice that was done in India. We still love and respect all the soldiers that were there, including, the leader, Colonel Santosh Babu, and it's something, a matter of pride for all of us when we talk about him. The Chinese are trying to create that entire scenario, of course, because we know what exactly happened there. That story has been out, so I won't get into that entire thing. Now, in this video, he can be heard that we are guarding the border. Just keep it that way. Never a brother said to me that the hilltop is bitter. Didn't say that the above conditions are very poor. Didn't say these words. Now, you can look at it from two ways. One, you can see that they are trying to say, oh no, our soldiers are very strong. We didn't, this and that. And you can look at it from the another way. This is the hero of China talking about the factor that their conditions on the border are bitter. That is something we need to look at. With China, anything that the Chinese talk about, always remember, look at the other side. Right? So he's actually saying, never anybody told me that the hilltop conditions were bitter. So basically, people avoided saying that, but the conditions were bad. Right? He also says that didn't say that the above conditions were very poor. Didn't say these words. Means the conditions were poor, but nobody said it. Fair enough. Let's try and believe what he's trying to say, but there is another angle to it. Okay, so that if a lot of us think that the Chinese are sitting in eastern Ladakh and stuff like that, remember one thing: these are soldiers that are not as tough as our soldiers who know how to survive in these particular regions. So there's a big difference, right? Kifaba was selected as the Chinese government as the torchbearer for the Beijing Olympics. I think I'd like to take you back to that time when India basically decided not to send the senior team to China to for the Olympics and stuff like that. So there was a retaliation given there and then. But this was again a provocation against India. So they've been fingering, they've been nitpicking around the place. Uh, Next, I'd like to talk about the Twitter, deal. This is something, as I said, is very critical for India because one party or the other. I'm not talking about that as a citizen. I'm more worried about the stability and peace in this country. I'm in dev talks. I keep politics away from this entire thing. But whatever happens online when these propaganda campaigns happen, it creates a certain sense of uncertainty within the country, which is not good. And that's what I'm going to talk about mostly. The Twitter deal. A lot of people have studied this. I've done a video. Please check it out. It was one of my first reactions, and I think I'm falling bang on target when I talked about Chinese leverage on Elon Musk. Did a little more research and we realized that there's a JL Warren Capital, Tesla's market share in the new energy vehicle category in China was about 12% last year, right? And this report was written in 2021. So let's take it at that particular sense. Their cars are incredibly popular, especially considering auto buyers in China are more price sensitive than those in the United States. In 2020 and 2019, the Chinese government spent 11.3 billion yuan, that's $1.7 billion, and 14.4 billion yuan, which is $2.2 billion, subsidizing the electric vehicle industry. And that's the catch point, which I'm reading at the end. Tesla racked in about 25% of those subsidies. Something that we need to understand, right? So that's the kind of money that the Chinese have within Tesla. So there's a lot of leverage. I wonder if I would take you back to 2021 when the Chinese had put some questions about the autopilot and some seat belt and this and that of the Tesla. There were some crashes indeed, but Tesla lost a lot of money during those days. So that's one of the kind of leverage that the Chinese have. Have China done this to control Twitter is something which is ringing in my mind. I'm not able to substantiate this particular statement that I'm trying to say, but right, okay. So I'll take it at that. Joe Biden today, as a matter of fact, said that Twitter spews lies across the world. Now, this is very interesting since most of his the Western world, I won't call it his, but the collective West propaganda campaigns actually happen on Twitter. So it's an interesting statement, but let's take it with the view of China. The Chinese government sought assurances that Musk will not sell Starlink in China after Musk made the terminals available in Ukraine, and he's trying to do it in Iran. Now, Indian government said the same thing, that you please take licenses and then start working. We need a little control and stuff like that. He called India unfair business practices, but there's not a single word that comes out of China. So we need to understand this guy has a lot of money coming out of China. That money is also leverage. He was probably mostly in tears when the Shanghai lockdown happened and his factory was pretty much shut. So, there is a lot of issues in that particular front. We need to be careful. There's a reason a lot of the corporates around the world are just plucking out from Twitter ads. So there's something happening in this particular front that we need to be careful about. We know how Twitter is used in this country. So need I say more? I just wanted to put that out there. Now, trade deficit as a weapon is a very interesting subject. The main talk is China ka maal hai, sasta hota hai. Sorry for the hota hai ka mistake in the spelling. That's my bad. Uh, One of the things that we've seen, this was a dialogue pre probably the face off days of 2020 कि भाई चाइना का माल सस्ता होता है यार बाहर किसी को कुछ चाहिए let's go get the ready container full of Chinese saman, dump it here and use it after that. So that was a lot of people were doing that. As a matter of fact, traders from Gujarat, UP, Maharashtra, Karnataka were taken for holidays by the Chinese government to China. They would take them around, they would find them, dine them, they would just make them have a beautiful time, and bring them back, and then give them very good discounts and this and that so a whole lot of influence was created within India by China for Chinese products to start coming into India. Now, one of the things that the Chinese government does, and leave alone the political agreements, I'll talk about that, is that they subsidize these particular factories when they want to get into some place, so that it becomes a little more competitive than the domestic market, which literally kills the domestic industry, and the Chinese product create a supply line for themselves and literally capture out the market. Uh, this was done with mobile phones. I mean, for that matter, look at it. About 10 years ago, how many mobile phone companies were there in India? Hardly anything. Right now, you've got so many of them, and Chinese firms are still there, but their footprint has reduced to a large extent. So this is not something that the Chinese do with just India. They've been doing it all around the place. US has lost its entire industrial base because of this. So it's something that we need to understand, and there's of course a lot of work which is happening in this particular front. Political agreements. I know all of you would know what I'm talking about. Now these political agreements, I don't want to get into the politics of it, but I want to talk about the nuance of it. These political agreements are basically signed to create a certain amount of leverage again. So they're not in love with anyone. Let me tell you that one thing very clearly, and that's what is alleged in terms of a political criticism when it is done. Fair enough, it's a great point as a political criticism, but when we are studying China, we must understand they are looking at it as a leverage. If they're going to donate some money here and there, they have a certain string to pull. That's the same thing as Elon Musk, right? So something that we need to understand. Sponsorships, I'm calling them sponsorships politely. They're basically bribes and underhanded table money that the Chinese have been very famous for doing. As a matter of fact, the entire kachra, if I may use the word, in Sri Lanka is due to money which was paid to pretty much everyone in the leadership. This thing, and we all know this is a very open secret, uh, open thing. It's not even a secret anymore. So sponsorships, I'm actually, as I said, putting it very politely. So trade deficit has been created, and this is not now. We're just probably starting to realize this now. But this has been happening for such a long time, and we've been foolish enough not to even recognize this, right? So it's now we suddenly expect a switch to be put off, and suddenly all the Chinese goods to go out of the market, and we should not buy anything from China. And every time that China in the trade report comes out, everybody has a thing to say that we're not doing enough. Boss, we set up these supply chains for the past 10, 20 years. How is it supposed to just go off in two? It's not possible. So, and it was done like this. It was done for the lack of a better word, in a backhanded way. So this whole ecosystem needs to be debunked, and it needs to be removed, which is not an easy task. You can imagine the amount of people China would have taken. And when Chinese do this kind of stuff, it's not 3 5 people. They want to pick up the trader community from a bloody city and take them to China and make them have a ball. You won't even know about it, right? So this is what they do. This is how they work. This is where they do this, so that they understand what you guys are looking for, and they give you product at rates that you would not imagine. And that's how they capture the market. Next point is China is starting to hyphenate the India-US relationship. Uh, Something that the Chinese get very irritated about is the Quad Summit. If you look at the rhetoric coming out of their state mouthpieces, Global Times, Xinhua, China Daily, and stuff like that, it goes up high end when, especially when the Quad is mentioned. So it seems like this seems to be a major irritant to them. Now look at it: India, Japan, two major economies in the place. Uh, let's just look at it economic wise. Of course, military is a completely different game, and India is not in a military sort of an alliance with the Quad, but uh, it's very very clear that Quad is a major irritant towards them, right? SEO. Now India is a part of the SEO. There's a lot of politics about it. SEO summit just happened. Now, interestingly, Wang Yi came in March to meet Minister Jaishankar and tried to meet Narendra Modi Sahab also. And, basically it was the invitation to the SEO. Uh, I guess the Chinese wanted to come around and say, yeah, please come to the SEO, let's work together and this and that. And when I think there was a deal done for a disengagement and, Mr. Modi's visit to the SEO himself. I personally feel that Xi Jinping had to travel to the SEO because, in case he wouldn't have and done it online the way he's been doing it, and remember, Xi Jinping traveling abroad was a big thing. He hadn't gone out for like 1,000 days or something like that. So he went there and he showed complete weakness. Everybody was hugging and shaking hands, and he was standing 6 feet away with a mask and tightly wrapped up on his face. And then he did not go for a dinner, and then he ran off early. And then the whole kachra about the coup and all that stuff came out, if you remember. If I just jog your memory for a bit. So SEO, Xi Jinping had to travel because if he wouldn't have gone, he was fearing that Modi Saab would kind of, steal the show. So that's something which is very critical to understand. Uh, on the other hand, BRICS is another game altogether. BRICS actually is coming out to be a very popular alliance amongst the newer economies and newer building economies today. We know Saudi Arabia is wanting to come in. We know Argentina is wanting to come in, and this seems to be another, a global South sort of an affair building up. Of course, India and China is a bit of a challenge in this entire game. So there are Quad where Chinese perceive it, and of course it is against China, and there are places where India is also working with China for certain things. The game would be to kind of get your way out. Like one of the examples, as I told you, SEO was a absolute masterstroke. I mean, whatever said and done, this man actually had to travel with the fear that his, uh, you know, Modi Saab could just steal the show over there. So that's something that we need to understand. Of course, Indian diplomacy has come of age. The Chinese don't visit that much around the place. Their visits are very, very little. Today, Olaf Scholz is sitting in China, and we know the kind of criticism that is coming his way and what's happening around the world. So it's another story altogether. We need to understand and make that very clear that hyphenation with US should not go sideways for us, right? It has a dual connotation. It's a show of strength as well as can go sideways for us as well. So if the US does something silly, we should not be, you know, kind of stuck with the backlash of it. And that's one of the reasons I guess India does not get into the alliances. Now, this is interesting. This is the cartographic, messaging that the Chinese do. Of course, if you look very closely to India here, there are two things that you would notice: that Kazakhstan looks bigger than India. Of course, the map has been kind of designed in a certain way to show India very, very small and insignificant. Please look at the size of China; you'll kind of understand. Of course, the Jammu and Kashmir region, there are two, three lines there that are very confusing. Of course, Aksai Chin and Arunachal Pradesh is not even shown here. So this was of course put out on CGTN. So this is what was expected. Uh, the state of JNK, Jammu and Kashmir and Ladakh Union Territory today, if you see, there is also a bottom line which basically takes off the neck part of India and it kind of shows it with Pakistan. So this is what the Chinese do, right? Cartographic this thing, and we spoke about this yesterday with Colonel Ajay Raina as well. Uh, there they produce maps and maps and maps and maps and maps and come out and this line and that line and this line and that line, and it's a very confusing affair. A lot of people have made a lot of YouTube videos on it. Personally, I'll tell you, I you can't say one from the other because these are perceived lines and it's damn difficult to figure it out. But anyways, you see the map that was done here. uh, this was the map that was issued by the Russians now, and this is done by Sputnik. See the way the JNK and the Arunachal Pradesh has been shown. uh, Tells you who your real friends are. So this was probably a kick by the Russians to the Chinese. And for those of you who actually believe that Russia China are like that, that's also a check for you. uh, Interestingly, so this is a cartographic this thing, that this is part of the Chinese game, right? So this is not just one single thing. This is what they will keep on doing till, and the way they think is that if they keep on doing it again and again and again and again, it'll probably start, people say, okay, forget it, yes, let's have your way. But that's not happening today, right? So there's a bit of a resistance which is coming across, and the Chinese will keep on doing this. It's not provocations, it's just what they do. We need to understand, we need to counter it, and we need to protect ourselves. That's it. Right now, there are certain things that we need to figure out, and of course, another thing is, I forgot to mention that we need to also create a deterrence and a cost. Soon enough we get our economy in our control and the balance of payments and this and that, we should be able to develop a certain cost to the Chinese for every little thing that they do in terms of all these things. We can issue maps. Which brings me to the final part of my presentation, which is the touch points that India has been doing, which probably, and I'm sure positively actually, the Chinese take as a provocation from India. The celebration of the Galwan heroes is one of the biggest things. Let me show you, every time the Galwan date comes out, you see the articles that are coming out in these Chinese newspapers. You'll be amused with the kind of stuff that they actually, you know, put out. And it's really funny. So I'm going to talk about these little things. Indian missile tents, they've also got, so I mentioned hyphenation, but they also know that in case of a war between India and China, none of these countries would come and fight with India. So they've got this notion that India stands alone and we've got, Pakistan, and we can probably do something with India. The Chinese companies that India has put under radar, the latest one is the MG. Of course, a very popular car, which I can see on the roads nowadays, but good looking car. I mean, jokes apart, but this company is under the scanner. Of course, a lot of other companies have been under the scanner. A restrictive FDI policy, the Chinese would, a lot of the unicorns in India had a lot of Chinese money. We know that. So that has been restricted to a large extent. Spy rings are being caught left, right, and center. Movements with Taiwan. Interestingly, the Commerce Minister of Taiwan was in India some time ago. There are a lot of other movements which are happening, and there are a lot of other discussions which are taking place. I'm coming back on the 9th with the Taiwanese for a talk on this particular subject. So I'll leave it. I'll give you some hints, and then I'll leave it for that particular day. The Dalai Lama has been in focus for a little bit. We'll talk about that. And of course, defense sales. Now, I don't have much to say about defense sales. It's been there in the public domain. Philippines, Vietnam, Malaysia, Indonesia, and most importantly, Africa. I don't have a slide prepared for this defense sales part, so just going to take that up right now. Africa uses a lot of Soviet weapons, and today I was talking to Major General Narayan, who made me understand that because the Africans use a lot of Russian weapons, they would be needing a lot of spares and stuff like that. That's one of the reasons we saw a lot of African countries coming to the Def Expo. Probably they're looking up for a supply chain sort of a thing, because Russia is going to be involved in this game for a little bit before it starts exporting. Probably need to fill up its own reserves. I don't know which direction that particular war is going to, but anyways, they would be, of course, trying to arm up and keep a lot of spares. So I guess there is a mutual understanding between India and Russia with regards to having spare sales and stuff like that going to countries that are using Russian weapons and aircraft. Uh, just look at it. If Russia and China have no limits relationship, why didn't they call China? China with the mighty industrial base and great amount of foreign reserves and this and that. The call still came to India. Missile tests. Now, of course, I'm not going to go through all these missile tests. These are just different news that came out in October, and there are a lot more. The site was just single one, so I just put 5-6 of them. But anyways, that gives you this thing that there's a lot of missile tests which are happening in India of various different kinds. Uh, we don't see much reaction coming from the rest of the world except from Pakistan and China. who keep blabbering about the factor and this and that. There've been tests of interceptors, there've been tests of air to air, there've been tests of submarine launched, there've been tests of nuclear capable long range missiles. I believe Agni 6 is going to happen in some time, and whole lot of things have been happening. So that's one thing that they feel as a threat, and one of the reasons why the Chinese have sent this ship. They want to probably understand what is happening and why is India suddenly picking up the pace in terms of testing. I think this is a great lesson that India is learning from the war of Ukraine. If it's connected or if it was a previous programs, kudos. The kind of firepower and the display that we've seen in the past couple of days by the Russians and the kind of damage they're able to do, having a good missile program is something which is very, very good. Chinese notions that India stands alone. Of course, I can't put a slide about notions, but this is what they think, right? Of course, a lot of one thing that we must understand: the Chinese, of course, and Pakistanis. India talks about a two-front threat and this and that. Look at each one of these countries individually. Their own capability of mounting a war today is quite questionable. But leaving that apart, the Indian Armed Forces, as I think a lot of people have been talking about on my channel, have been talking about and practicing this particular drill and this particular scenario for a long time. So it's not going to be a surprise in any way. And India does not stand alone, because at the end of it, from all the time, all of these jhadups we've had with both these countries, we've always known that we've had to fight them alone. We've always known that nobody else is going to come and fight for us in our country, for our land. Who's going to Ukraine? There's some mercenaries and this and that. They're going for money. They're not going for ideology. I mean, if the going gets rough, he's just going to say, okay, I quit and run away. What are you going to do then? India all knows this very, very clearly, that our battle with China or the otherwise is going to be by ourselves, and we need to be self-sustainant and reliant to ensure that we are able to fight it. The Chinese companies, as I said, MG Motors has been under the radar, and this is just one company, guys. You know the amount of stuff that was there. There's Xiaomi who's under the radar, and there's X, Y, Z. There's so many of these companies who've been caught, who've been investigated. Money has been received. They've been banned after that. And another, I mean, big thing that we kind of forget is the factor that the app bans that was done. Uh, USA has still not been able to ban TikTok. And 2 days back, a news came out that the Chinese have admitted that somebody sitting in China can access all Europe and American TikTok data. So that's interesting. We protected ourselves 2 years ago, and the West is still today fighting it. So a lot of the Chinese companies are under radar. Any sort of FDI coming in has to go through loops and hellbounds for before it actually gets approved. I think there was some 382 company that was stuck for about 2.5 3 years before, I think about 50, 50 or 80 of them, which were essential, got some clearances, and they've got a lot of loopholes to go through before they can actually come and hit the market. So it's something which is going to be very difficult for the Chinese to start doing uh, undercutting business in India, because there's going to be a lot of scrutiny which is happening. Remember, that actually undermines the basic Chinese plan, and that's exactly what my point is, that since 2020 there's been a very restrictive FDI policy aimed at China, and India didn't name China. India said any country that has a border with India, we need to be very careful. So I mean, there was a very, very simple thing, and so the reason India did that is because Chinese would open shell companies around, in rogue nations like Pakistan or smaller countries like Nepal and stuff like that, and invest in India through there. So this was a setup that was done, and I'm sure if I can think of it, government has gone 35 steps ahead. So there's a very restrictive FDI policy. The Chinese would not be able to infiltrate the Indian economy the way they would have planned to, the way probably they've done it to the West. Today, Olaf Scholz is running to sell a port in Hamburg, which is a very strategic port, and the French are against it. Again, I've done a video about this for the differences that we see between France and Germany. So there's a bit of a clash happening there as well. But he says Germany first, and he's done what he had to do. There's The Chinese would not be able to enter the market, and that creates a problem in their overall strategy against India. Chinese firings. This is happening too often, and I think this is a matter of concern. This Chinese woman came in as a Buddhist monk, lived in Delhi, involved in a lot of anti-national activities, and she was caught just look at her. She's probably in the entire setup of a monk and stuff like that. So this was one. There've been multiple more ones. I just wanted to just show a couple of ones. Noida police bust Chinese national living illegally in India. I think these guys had a lot of Aadhaar cards and this and that and fake Indian IDs. They were pushing around the place. Chinese espionage links uncovered in India while probing money laundering. So this was again in July. That was in June and September. I guess every month we find some of the other news coming out with regards to this particular front. So you can imagine it's not. And guys, please understand this is hybrid war. Okay, so this is something. This is in the gray zone. It's not a kinetic battle, but it's not peace and friendliness. Again, this is the center part where they will try and undermine our system, right? Having said that, we've been also giving hits back to them. So there's it's not something that this thing. And please understand, when you bust a spy ring, you not only bust a spy ring, you bust the entire supply chain after that. Because when you're busting a spy ring, you've got somebody monitoring them for a long time, right? And you basically are able to determine their entire chain of activities, and then only you break the ring. Because if that's why it's called a ring, because there are multiple players in this which create the circle. So it's not just one guy, and this probably are the front guys that the police and the authorities are talking about. There are a lot of people at the back end that would get caught, right? Where the information was coming out from, where was it going, what are the sources. So those sources will be blocked and a whole lot of things. So these rings, when they are busted, they are very critical to understand that it breaks the entire cycle of information going into the enemy today. When that happens, it's a big, huge setback, right? I'll just take you back to the days when India's raw lost a lot of assets. It took us 10, 15 years, 20 years to build up that entire capability to come back into shape and start doing things. So this is a big hit. Now, India has been playing its cards very well with Taiwan. Of course, there's no overt this thing. And, India mentioned about the Taiwan tensions very clearly when we said that this kind of nonsense should not be done. But Taiwan in India are keen to kind of engage in the Make in India policy. As I said, the uh, Taiwan's Deputy Economic Minister I'm sorry, Mr. Chen was here, uh, and there's been a lot of movements in terms of the semiconductor industry, and that's something that we know. So Taiwan and India have started doing some stuff. There are talks about a free trade agreement. There are talks about certain engagements at a very higher level, but kept very quiet at the moment. But let me tell you, the Chinese know it. So this is, of course, not just a message to China, but this is also for our own, expansion in terms of our relationships. Now, the Dalai Lama is very interesting. Of course, he went to Arunachal Pradesh. He went to Tawang, which is probably throwing some oil in the Chinese fire. He went to Ladakh in the Indian Air Force helicopter. And this was very interesting. The Dalai Lama begins his 3-day teachings for Taiwanese Buddhists in Dharamshala. So one is the Dalai Lama, and then you add the Taiwanese into it, and we created a mix. And this is what is happening. So guys, please understand, if the Chinese can play these little games and put one thing here, put one thing, we are also doing it. It's just that our media and our organizations don't propagate it. When you find and when you start digging into these things, you'll find stuff that India also does, which is pretty aggressive. And look at it from the Chinese angle, you get a little pissed off when you see something like that, which is what we get when we see something weird. So it's not a one-sided affair at all. And gone are the days when India was quiet. So today we see clear hints. Minister Jaishankar has been, talking about it very clearly. They came into India, Bongi came into India, this whole thing happened, disengagement happened, but see the kind of treatment that he was given. Nobody received him. He wanted to meet Mr. Modi and he was told no. His treatment was short of ice cold. It was just there. And here is another big example. I'm sure the Chinese can read A and I. There have been a lot of defense deals in Southeast Asia. We know that, right? Philippines, Malaysia, Vietnam, the BrahMos is going. A lot of other things will be going about. There are talks about rocket systems which are going there. So there's a whole lot which is happening in that. I've just put in certain figures. Of course, this is in depth. It just tells us that India's defense exports were about 8,434 crores in 2020, 2021, 9,100 crores in 19 and 20, and 2059 crores in 2015 and 16. So, there is a bit of a growth in terms of the what do you call, the defense exports. And this year, after the defense expo, I feel that a lot of things which have come into the news probably will give us a big boost. There's also another interesting news that the Confederation of All India Traders National President BC Bhartia and National General Secretary Praveen Khandelwal said that according to reports received from all over the country, this year Diwali festivals season sales will generate a business of about 125 lakh crore around the country, and China will face a direct loss of 50,000 crores. This was pre-Diwali. Some estimates that was reported by the first post was at about 75,000 crores. That's a lot of money for anyone. I mean, so let's understand, for the Chinese today, since Xi Jinping has come into power, they have lost about, if I am not mistaken, they have lost $6 trillion. Right? That's what the world lost when the pandemic started in the year 2020. That's what the Chinese have lost themselves in the past, what, 24th October till now. That's and that's not me saying. That's the Chinese themselves saying that. Right, so that's all we had. As far as the presentation is concerned, I'll really appreciate your comments. There's some of them here. Please hit hard if you have any questions or comments or any other points that you'd like to mention that I have not mentioned here. Before that, guys, like this video. Anybody seeing this, please, my humble request, it's a simple click from your thumb or index finger. Just hit the like button. It really, really helps me grow. And I want to, figure out how to reach the right message to more and more people across the country. Because what I see in terms of defense and strategic analysts today, a lot of us are talking a lot of rhetoric rather than facts and figures, and that's what I want to do at Dev Talks. So let's start up with whatever is written here. Hi Rohit, good evening. Thank you for the wishes. There's no challenge from either government or Indian Navy towards the Chinese ship at our territory. Only statement that we are watching closely or monitoring. Even Sri Lanka has become a stooge. I agree with you as far as Sri Lanka is concerned. As General Narayan mentioned the other day, the Sri Lankans have been refueling Chinese ships in the open sea. Of course, they're in desperate need of foreign exchange. They'll probably do anything that comes their way. But as far as the challenge is concerned, I don't think it'll be put out in the open media. These ships are touching towards the electromagnetic and the electronic warfare sort of a scenario, which is a closely guarded secret for any country today. So if there's any countermeasures or if there's anything which is happening from the Indian side, I'm sure there's going to be no publicity at all. As I mentioned in the beginning, the Wang Yang 5, whatever I told you were rumors, and I mentioned it very clearly. Each one of them are rumors. Whether we were successful or not is something that the armed forces would know. But having said that, I don't think it's that easy for or it's not correct for us to kind of assume that there is no countermeasures that have been taken. I'm sure there are, and I'm sure there is a lot of work which has happened at the back end. India is not one of those who would just sit down and take this punch. But of course, they won't be discussed in the open domain. Right? Mandar, good evening. All these ships just probing Indian Navy ships, and our ships are tracking their ships. Cat and mouse until a conflagration happens. Exactly. There's no question about it. But please understand the capacity of the Chinese to sustain themselves in the Indian Ocean is questionable. Guys, I'd refer to you to this particular video that I've done with Admiral Anup Singh. It's an eye-opening video of the Chinese Navy. It talks about how long the legs of the Chinese Navy are. Right? The Chinese have this ambition of spreading their wings around the place. India is talking about being around in its own yard, which is the Indian Ocean, and that's a large enough space. So our sea legs are much smaller than what they have to do. And trust you me, the kind of news that one can see with regards to the Chinese aircraft carrier and the Chinese other frigates and stuff like that is not that positive, right? They tried taking their aircraft carrier into the Sea of Japan, and they had to tow it back down. This was last year. The engines packed up, and they literally had to get tugboats to bring it back into port. So it's not all hunky dory there. And please understand, naval, and I'm just talking as a layman, which I understand that sea-going countries are traditional, right? They've been doing it for hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years. Uh, there is a tradition of sailing, right? So this is something that we must understand. And look at the powers that are sailing today are all predominant, very old sailing powers. And India, all of us, if you know the Chola Empire, one of the largest navies at that time, and we have the we've done trading Southeast Asia. We know our temples are found there. So there is a tradition of sailing within India. With the Chinese, don't have that. So there's a big problem there. The Chinese Navy is relatively new, right? So yes, they will do these provocations. They will keep on doing this. And remember one thing: Indian Navy has also sailed in the South China Sea. Indian Navy has gone through the Taiwan Strait as well, right? So this is a you're right in a way that this is a cat and mouse game. That's the game. That's how it is. Sir, don't pull your punches in the Congress. We are today lagging behind quite a lot because of them. I am not pulling my punches, sir. The only reason I didn't want to get into the politics of it because that's not the subject of today's discussion. Today's discussion is talking about how the Chinese influence uh, spreads in a particular country, that is soft influence, political influence, and stuff like that. So of course that's a well-known fact that there is a deal that was signed, and of course there is certain amount of influence. That is all I'm trying to say, and I'm not wanting to say that this or that or the other. It's the factor that the influence has reached in that particular factor, in that particular place, which helped the Chinese come into the Indian market and establish a firm ground in terms of their supply chains and reduce a lot of our industries into rubble. That's the point I'm trying to make. The Chinese bubble burst, especially after Galwan. Well, the Chinese bubble burst too many times, sir. 62 was the only time I would say, and we are doing this video with Colonel Raina. It was an eye opener last night. I mean, it was something that amazing. We're going to be doing it in many, many parts. But this Chinese bubble has been bursting in 1967. It burst again in 1975, and then through some Brongchu, and then of course in Galwan, and there are multiple incidents in the middle. So yeah, you're absolutely correct, and the Chinese bubble will be burst again. So let's be very very clear on that. Tesla heavily depends on subsidies. Even in the US, it's not really profitable. Musk is a shrewd businessman, so he would play along with CCP if it benefits him. Exactly my fear, sir. Exactly my fear. There's no question. And you also say, I think India might let competitors to Starlink like OneWeb of UK, which might agree to conditions set by Indian government. Sunil Mittal of Airtel owns 30% stake in OneWeb. I believe, there was this one page of the FTA that was leaked. I don't know if it's the authentic page or not, but yeah, that thing mentioned about the OneWeb that you're mentioning. Yeah, of course, that it looks like a great alternative. And see, Elon Musk has a very weird way of thinking. He's a genius, no doubt, and he's doing wonderful things for himself in terms of Tesla and this and that. It's great. But if it's not my way, it's the highway. It's sort of the way he looks at things because he's so powerful and rich and stuff like that. So I mean, India kind of pushed him back, and we know that with the Tesla incident. Chirag, you say China fears most from its own people. Well, that is absolutely correct. And China has a lot to fear today with regards to the COVID lockdowns that they've kind of implemented within their country. We see, I mean, those of you who follow me on Twitter, please have a look at the kind of photographs I keep, videos and photographs of screaming, shouting people that I keep tweeting. And these are real. So you can imagine what if this is what is coming on Twitter and the Chinese aren't supposed to be on Twitter. You can imagine what's happening in that country, as a matter of fact. And this zero COVID policy is going to take him to the doom. And it's actually probably Chinese are already knocking the door of doom. We have strong human intelligence, Pakistan. How's our network inside China? Uh, it's an interesting question, sir. I'm sure we have a lot of network inside China. There's uh, military attaches that are there who do this kind of stuff. There are also agents which are there. I know there are, I mean, I'm sure you can go figure it out, but there are a lot of ex law people that were posted in China. There is, I'm sure, a certain network which exists. I mean, it's not that India is completely blank and we don't know what's happening inside China and stuff like that. Please understand, if analysts like me can look at basic news and we know what is the way that the society is thinking, what is the way at a very basic level, if I may say so. I'm not trying to boast that I know everything. Their military is kind of going forward and stuff like that. I'm sure the government has much more sources. Uh, I'd recommend you read about the Indo-Mongolian relations and how the Chinese cables go through Mongolia. There's a little bit of a little article that somebody had written, and I read it about 2 years ago. I don't remember the entire thing, but you can search on it on Google. You'll be able to get something. Right? If I'm given an option of buying any product and it will be a local brand that costs sorry, double than the Chinese one, I'll prefer the local one. In fact, I try to find any other brand before the Chinese brand. No questions, sir. As a matter of fact, let me tell you this a little story. We wanted to buy some bulbs, and so we had these bulbs that were there that we bought from a couple of years ago, and chandelier sort of a thing, and we took it to the market and said, "Yaar, ye wala bulb de do." So we said, nahi hai, nahi hai, nahi hai. And we went into a place where, a lot of electronics is available and stuff like that. So we went there and we could not find this thing. So finally, we knew one guy and we asked him, यार भाई क्या है भाई क्यों नहीं मिल रहा? कहता साहब चाइना का माल है कोई नहीं खरीदता पड़ा रहता है फिर ऐसे यहाँ पर. So it's it's gone to that level that people have. You're absolutely correct that people have come to that level that listen, यार नहीं चाइना का नहीं लेना कुछ और ले लेते हैं. I'm personally waiting when the Chinese iPhone 14 comes in. I want to be. I mean, I'm sorry, when the Indian iPhone 14 comes in, I want to be the first in line, or probably one of the first few to buy it. If it's Indian, I'll spend the extra money, whatever it may be, to prove a point that we are not stupid, and we need to kind of understand that what we do in terms of China Kamal and buy it because it's cheap, it's hurting our country right to the bottom. And there's just no question about it. So we need to stop this as a country. We are to a large extent, but it'll still take a long time. How do I contact you? So my email address is mentioned in the description. You can just click the description and you'll find my email address. You can write there, regularly follow your broadcast. Thank you so much. Amazing content. Thank you, sir. Try and do fact based content rather than anything else. And the last comment for the day is that the Dalai Lama is such a noble soul, but China calls him a terrorist while blocking any UN resolution against actual terrorists sitting in Pakistan. I wonder what happened to the real Panchen Lama. He seems to be well settled in China, and that's what China would like us to believe. But it's a good question. Panchen Lama. Uh, Again, a video I had done with General Dushan Singh about this, and there's a very interesting game that they're wanting to play because they know that the Dalai Lama is of age and the inevitable shall happen sometime or the other, but they want to kind of capitalize on that, and that's what they're trying to do within Tibet. Uh, People do know about Dalai Lama inside Tibet. Remember that there are people sitting on both sides of the fence, and you can talk to people within China, right? They're not blocking phones; they're blocking Twitter and this and that. There are ways you can still communicate. People do talk amongst each other, and there are connections within Tibet. Those connections have been used by India to a large extent in a lot of spaces, in a lot of covert spaces, and I won't want to mention anything more than that. But news does travel. So yeah, I mean, what happened to the Panchang Lama? They've put out these photographs, and I'm sure he's, as per what the Chinese say, he is in protective custody. The Chinese say he's happily living. I'll call it protective custody, right? How will EU react to Germany using? Well, I talked about this in my video where there's a Scholz and Macron are having a bit of an argument about this. It's not good. It's not good. EU is based on Germany. Remember that, right? The Deutsche Mark is the basis for the EU. Which other country is so strong? There's no one. The French are there. Yes, okay, fine. I mean, but the French can't carry the entire EU's weight. Italy, we know what's happening in Italy. They've been politically unstable. Their economy has taken a beat. Who else? Poland? Really? Netherlands? Who? Lithuania? I don't see anyone else. Or Ukraine? Ukraine is not in EU. But anyways, the kind of force that is required in EU is just not there. With the kind of backlash that they've got because of these stupid sanctions, they are going to be in a lot of trouble. Currently, their gas reserves are full. So gas prices are falling in the EU. They're pretty happy. Oh, ho, nikal jayega, ye wo, and all that. Remember one thing: the minute the gas reserves start falling when the winter comes in, because of the levels of gas reducing, the prices will start going up again. And when there is no refill, what are they going to do? The Qataris have said, we can't give you that much. The Americans are selling them at 6 times higher the price. Don't believe me? Ask Macron, who put out a press statement. So EU is going to be reacting in a very differential way to answer your question in terms of Germany, because Germany wants to put Germany first. The last time when Germany did that in the 1930s and 40s, we all know what happened. So I am not sure where this association of countries, if I may, is going. It's going to be difficult. Chirag Saab says, amazing session, sir. Waiting for the next Ajay Saab session. Yes, I will get him as soon as I can, and probably the next week. Pochap, he's been traveling quite a bit, and it's I've been pestering him and getting him on the show whenever this thing. And we've had some connection issues yesterday. Apologies for that, but I'm really grateful to him that he's still, when he's around the place. He was in Srinagar last time I caught him. He was in Dehradun, so he's running around for his personal work, and he still finds about an hour for us to have this chat. The Chinese government subsidies production for its manufacturing companies. That is how they offer products at such low costs. How can Indian manufacturers compete with such prices? Exactly, sir. The first part is absolutely correct. That is how they do it. They actually set up these supply chains, and they'll ride through to make sure this thing. Indian manufacturers, sir, there's something known as production PLI schemes, which have come up, that have actually given a huge boost to the Indian manufacturing setup. Apart from that, there's a lack of demand of Chinese products today. There's a lack of demand with regards to traders ordering Chinese products from China today. Today, the imports from China are more or less essentials. And of course, a lot more of chips and this and that. That's something that we need still, because our industry has not come up. And API, which is the most important thing, pharmaceutical ingredients, something that we get from China. So these are three, four things that are still there. Indian manufacturers, to compete, of course, there has to be a market which is created. There it has to be made lucrative. Tax benefits need to be given. Chinese products need to be taxed, and it needs to have more tariffs. As a matter of fact, so that's something that India has already done. So yeah, that's how you create a sort of a competitive environment when one guy is trying to literally undercut you. Uh, do we have a missile which can counter USA and Western powers and China? Well, why would you need a missile to fire at USA? But yeah, okay. Hypothetically, of course, the last missile that was tested has a range of about 6 to 8 thousand kilometers. I think the Agni 6 is going to be in the category of reaching that part of the world. So yeah, of course there are. But remember one thing, having a missile is one thing. Uh, when you're able to shoot satellites into space, uh, that's good enough. Because if you're able to shoot it up there, you can also program it to come down at a certain point, and that's what intercontinental ballistic missiles do. They follow a ballistic pattern into a lower Earth orbit and come down at a pre-programmed space. Uh, the Russians actually fired the first. I don't know if you remember the first satellite called Sputnik, and it created a panic within America because they realized if they could shoot up a satellite up in the air, they could also throw down a bomb. So yeah, having a dedicated missile for nuclear or conventional attacks is different, but the technology and the capability does exist. Germany doesn't fight nations; it fights the world. So, well, that's a big statement, if I may. Germany is about to subsidize its gas bill through a 200 billion package to save its industries, but other EU states aren't happy about it. Absolutely, that's why French President Emmanuel Macron met the German Chancellor Olaf Scholz, I think last week in Berlin, and they didn't even have a joint presser. And I did this video where I spoke about this. Check it out. It's an interesting video where I brought out some other stuff also. Okay, you guys keep putting in comments. I'm going to stop after 1 hour because that's all. Otherwise, I'm going to get a sore throat in the morning. What steps would you recommend to develop our own microchip and semiconductor sector? Sir, a lot of steps have already been taken. I think there's a $7 billion investment which is happening in that particular sector. Taiwan has put in a lot of focus and a lot of technology is being transferred there. There are factories which are coming up. This whole sector is supposed to get a big boost within the next 5 years. Remember one thing, we are talking about really, really high end chips. We're not talking about going from the 28 and onwards. We're talking about the really high end stuff which will be manufactured in India with an Indo Taiwanese sort of a collaboration. And it's something that is going to come out in the next couple of years. But there's been a tax subsidy which has already been given. Billions of dollars of investment has gone in. I think one of these big corporates has also invested into that. So there's a whole lot which is happening. But of course, this is not something that happens overnight. It'll take about a year, 2 years before we see Indian-made chips coming out in the market and creating a sort of a, you know, a set for themselves and a market for themselves, strong market for themselves. Right, Arun, thank you so much for your comments. And Mr. Dravadian Chimp, Dravanian Chimp, I'm sorry. Good night, sir. Thanks for the great information. Thank you so much, guys. It's always nice to put out these presentations, and especially when I know you guys appreciate it. And it's I'm a new YouTuber. I'm not a you know big guy who kind of does these shows every day, and I'm not a journalist or anything. I'm just a hobbyist. As a matter of fact, I've got a whole different career that I do in the daytime, and I do this on the side just because I love doing geopolitics. I love learning about stuff. And what better than sharing information than keeping it to yourself, because information grows that way. So thank you so much for joining me. Before I sign out, guys, please hit the like button. Like. That's all I want from you. I really want to have more likes because that helps YouTube beat the algorithm and for me to reach the right amount of people where the correct information can be put across. Uh, Rather than the whole rhetoric and China is running after India and just beating us at everything, not the case. There's a lot of stuff that India is also doing. When you put both of them together, you realize it's not just the Chinese that are fingering us. We do the same to them. It's a sort of a gray zone war that India is at. We need to be careful, we need to be constructive, and we need to keep a track, especially of Twitter. Thank you so much once again. If you can, please do join us as a member on Dev Talks by clicking the join button. If you can, please send us a super chat or a super sticker or contribute directly to me on the UPI number mentioned below there. Don't forget to visit my website www.thedevtalks.com. A lot of writing is going to come up there. I've written a lot of articles that I'm proofreading, which I'll be putting up there in the next week. It'll be great to have all of you there. And of course, yes, critically important, spread the message about Dev Talks. Share this video with your friends and people who are interested. If you want to join the Dev Talks WhatsApp group, email is in the description. Send me your number, a way for me to verify you, and as an email so that I can send you the link and you can add yourself onto the Dev Talks WhatsApp group. We keep it non-political, we keep it clean, we keep it geopolitical, and we keep it analytical, fact-based discussions on that group. And I'm proud of that. Thank you so much for joining in. Till next time, Jai Hind.